Hello and good afternoon, everybody. My name is Nizam Uddin, Chief Strategy Officer at Algebra, a global financial inclusion fintech, and a very proud member of Belong, the UK's cohesion and integration network. And that's why I'll be here today chairing this wonderful webinar. Belong was formed in 2019. We are a national membership network with a vision for a more integrated and less divided society. Our mission is to connect people, places, and organizations across all sectors and localities in the United Kingdom, so that we can disseminate knowledge and best practice on integration, and working closely with our members, raise the profile of cohesion work by developing a shared voice, improving practice and influencing policy. We know so many of you that have joined us today are members of our network and our community. So what we'd love to do is to get a sense of who's here with us. If you see the chat function at the bottom of the screen, we'd love for you to give your name, which organization you're from, and what kind of work that you do. I'm going to wait a moment and to see how many of you are engaging with us. We'd love to see who is here with us. And as you're doing that, allow me to share with you why we are here today. Today's webinar is going to focus on the latest findings from the Beyond Us and Them research, which is a longitudinal UK-wide research project by Belong and the Centre for the Study of Group Processes at the University of Kent, looking at societal cohesion across the UK. Community, connection, and cohesion during COVID-19 is the project's interim report and uses data collected between June and December 2020 to discuss how social cohesion has been impacted by the pandemic. Our plan for today is to share with you all of the key findings from our Beyond Us and Them interim reports, as well as hear from leading figures working on cohesion and integration on why this report is of value to them. We really want you to share your thoughts on the event on Twitter. And you will see from just above me, we have a hashtag, which is Beyond Us and Them. We would love for you to share your reflections on Twitter and your thoughts. If you have any questions for our panelists today, and this is where we're getting quite tech savvy, so we hope you can bear with us, we have a Q&A function. Please do put in your questions to the Q&A function, whereas if you want to have a chat, put it on the chat function, so that way we can have everybody heard. And before we proceed, none of this would have been made possible without the support of some of our key supporters. Belong and the Centre for the Study of Group Processes would like to thank the Nuffield Foundation for so generously funding this research. We would also like to extend a special thanks to our local authority research partners, especially Bradford Council, Walsall Council, Waltham Forest Council, Blackburn with Darwen Council, and Calderdale Council, and also to our community research partners, Spirit of 2012, the Joe Cox Foundation, Streets Games, Volunteering Matters, and Near Neighbours, without whom the research would simply not be possible. So thank you very much. We're also extremely grateful to the English Football Elite Trust, the Linking Network, Humanists UK, the WEA, Sporting Equals, and NCS for supporting the dissemination of our survey and for taking part in our advisory panel. So you'll be happy to hear that's the end of me speaking for a while, and we get to hear from some of our amazing speakers. Our first speaker is Professor Dominic Abrams, Research Project Lead and Professor of Social Psychology and the Director of the Centre for the Study of Group Processes in the School of Psychology at the University of Kent. His research examines all aspects of relations between different social groups and the behaviour of groups in general. Dom is the lead researcher on the Beyond Us and Them research project. He's also Vice Chair of the British Academy and leads on the Cohesive Societies programme. Dom, thrilled to have you with us. We hope the tech works, so bear with us if we have a few seconds whilst we get it up, but over to you.
Thank you very much, Nizam. It's a great pleasure to be here, and I am speaking on behalf of our entire project team here, so this is very much not just me. Without further ado, I'd like to get on with our talk now, so I'm going to share my screen and hopefully this will work. Okay, so what we're going to talk about today is our interim report on community connection and cohesion during COVID-19. I'm going to just briefly describe what the project was about. We're going to then be talking about trust at UK-wide and local levels. We're going to talk about the social cohesion investment, and in particular the 6 local areas that had invested in cohesion prior to the pandemic and what their experience has been, and then talk about the distinctive experience of being a volunteer and the role of volunteering as part of all this. And then I'll be drawing some conclusions and implications. So I hope you're going to find some of this material new and interesting. So what was our project all about? We were interested in investigating how the pandemic would affect relations between individuals, communities, and the state, and what we could learn for the future about this as we move through the pandemic and eventually beyond it. We've collected over 10.5 million data points so far, conducting these surveys every 4 to 6 weeks, pretty much all the way from May through till December, and we'll be carrying on again in March and June, so there's more to come. But we have a lot of evidence, and in combination with that quantitative evidence, we also have a lot of qualitative evidence from 28 different focus groups and 120 one-to-one interviews. So we've been collecting, I think, a very rich, both broad and deep perspective on what's been going on. And we're very grateful to all our partners for helping us with that, of course. Now, rather than a sort of traditional survey approach, which usually would simply do a national survey and see what's going on, we opted for the strategy of looking at particular places, or at least places that meant something to people. And what we did here was to, first of all, look at 3 different parts of the UK. And this partly goes back to links to some earlier work we did, but we looked at Kent, Wales and Scotland. Wales and Scotland obviously have their own national identity. Kent sort of on the border with France and the continent, also very much at the sort of the forefront of Brexit and all the rest, but also in many ways provided a sort of comparable but interesting contrast with Wales and Scotland. But together, the 3 of those areas give us a sort of general national context of what might be happening against which to compare other things. And the other things include, first of all, our look at 6 local authority areas where there's been a considerable investment in social cohesion via the MHCLG investment programme, and a 6th area, Calderdale, which itself had prioritised kindness and resilience in its own strategy. So we had identified these 6 local authorities as places where, as it were, conscious investment has been made in cohesion, and therefore it would be interesting to see if their profile and the responses we were getting from those areas differed from what was happening in the context and background of the rest of Britain. And I say Britain because we didn't have an opportunity to look at Northern Ireland, but doubtless that would have been really interesting and important too. We also accessed a large number of volunteers and community workers through our community partners, and that was a separate sample of people, but obviously they were more actively engaged in volunteering and other kinds of activities, and we were interested to find out what that experience and what that sort of work did for people, how it affected them, how it affected their perception of what was going on. So we have quite a lot of different types of data coming into this. Whenever I talk about findings here, we will be controlling for or adjusting for demographic differences, differences in ethnicity, age, gender, and everything else. So we've sort of taken into account some of the differences between the samples before looking at the effects on other things. How do we go about assessing cohesion? Well, broadly speaking, we think there are 2 general aspects to it. One involves the relationship between people and the state, the systems of organisation, management and governance around them. And so we looked at things like trust in local MPs, confidence in the government and its decisions, belief in conspiracy theories, desire to comply with the various lockdown rules and so on. And the second kind of aspect of cohesion that we looked at was the relationship between individuals and fellow citizens, how we get on with each other in various different ways. And there we looked at both the quality and the quantity of social connections during lockdown. So that's with friends and family and neighbours, people's trust in other people to respect safety rules, their engagement in various forms of social activism, things ranging from volunteering and donating to engaging in campaigns and doing other things, and their social attitudes, including attitudes towards things like migration and migrants. So what have we been finding? So let's begin by looking at the issue of trust. And as you'll be aware, trust is pretty fundamental for getting people's cooperation, for getting them to work together, do things together, and act in interests that are not purely their own. Well, of course, what would seem to be a critical event over the course of the year was Dominic Cummings' trip to Durham and Barnard Castle. And we picked a lot of this up in our qualitative work. It came through quite often. And in some ways that did mark a sort of shift in people's attitudes and affected their levels of trust. But there's a bit more to say about that, which we'll have a look at here. Now, this line here has appeared because I'm calling it the trust line. And it's the trust line because it's a line we've drawn on this graph, which shows that if a score or a point is above that line, it indicates that more people are trusting than distrusting. If the point is below that line, then it's showing the opposite, that there's a stronger level of distrust than trust. So what do we find? So this is the ratio of trust to distrust at both the general and the local level. So it's trust in politicians in general and trust in local MPs in particular. I think a number of things are immediately striking here. One is that clearly levels of trust in the local MP, the local level of trust, is higher than levels of general trust in politicians. And indeed, during May and June and July, shortly following the first lockdown, local trust was positive. More people were trusting than distrusting in their local MPs. And that subsided gradually as we got towards December, but really maintained quite a high position that a good proportion of people felt pretty trusting. When we look at trust in politicians in general, however, the picture is not so positive. The majority are distrusting, even in May, and certainly following that. Now, it might surprise you in a way because, of course, things began to open up during June, July, and August, and you might have thought that people would become more optimistic, perhaps more trusting. No. In fact, I think as things became more complicated, more difficult, and more unpredictable, levels of trust tended to decline. Nonetheless, a very important take-home from this particular graph is that the local trust in the local is substantially stronger than trust in the general or the national. What about what was going on in the different types of area? So here we're going to see a graph, and we're showing the same sort of lines, but for Kent, for the integration areas, for Scotland, and for Wales. And this is trust in the political response to COVID. So the item is the UK government is taking adequate measures to tackle the coronavirus pandemic. And I think two other things jump out at us really from this evidence. So one is that if you look at what I'll call the generic picture, Kent, Scotland and Wales, you can see a very similar pattern happening in all three of those areas, which is a pretty steady decline and going rather more steeply from September onwards in trust in the political response. People were beginning to lose confidence in national level response. And yet at the local level, which is the reddish pink dots, what happened, although trust wasn't all that high at the national level in June, it hasn't shown the strong dip that we get in the other areas. So in the integration areas, what we're finding is that there's something going on there that is sustaining trust interestingly, in the national response. It's, I would hesitate to suggest it, and I'm not sure of it, but I mean, one interpretation is that the local intermediaries in these integration areas, the connection that they have with people, is helping those people feel, well, first of all, understand the national strategy and also feel that it's appropriate. It's a very interesting phenomenon, particularly if you're in government and wanting to get people to cooperate. That's maybe a useful route. We also, from September onwards, were able to ask directly about trust in local level policy competence, no matter where you were. So that if you were in Scotland, that might be your local authority within the area of Scotland that you're in. Ditto for Wales, or for Kent, it means locally there as well. And here again, I think we find quite interesting patterns. What's perhaps most interesting is if you look at the integration areas, they have maintained and sustained a high level of trust in local level policy competence. So First of all, levels of trust are pretty high anyway. They're above 3 for the most part, other than in Kent in December, but mostly they're positive, but they're clearly positive in these integration areas. And that again suggests that something is going well, something is going right in those areas to a greater degree than elsewhere. What about trust in other people to respect restrictions? Well, here I think you can see there are a number of different things happening. If we go back to the left-hand side of the chart here in May, clearly people were relatively trusting following Dominic Cummings' press conference, but also, remember, following the opening up and therefore the greater uncertainty of what was going to be allowable, not allowable, how quickly, and so on. Trust in others went down. But notice it started off at a higher level in our integration areas than elsewhere, and it stayed at a high level and has maintained a high level. And although trust in others has gone up everywhere, which is encouraging through to September and December, I think what you can see is that in the integration areas, it's been a more stable, it's been generally a rather a clearer, more positive pattern, and that's been sustained. So I think that again points to a strength that we're observing in the integration areas, which has been more variable elsewhere. What might underpin these feelings of trust? So we looked at a number of different factors. We looked at plenty of demographic factors, of course, and it is the case that older people, wealthier people, people with higher socioeconomic status tend to be more trusting. In a sense, they're in a more secure position, so it's not surprising. But of greater interest to us, I think, is the psychological predictors, the things, the way that people are perceiving things, which are equally, if not more powerful in predicting feelings of trust. One of those is the sense of neighbourliness. People who felt that they were in a more neighbourly area had a higher sense of trust. People who identified more strongly with their local area had a higher sense of trust in others and politicians. And people who perceived their area as relatively less deprived, that is to say, so even if you see your area as very deprived, those within the area who feel it is less deprived relative to others are those who tend to be more trusting. Now, those perceptions of relative deprivation are quite interesting. They bear on things like income, job prospects, and so forth. But that may be to do with having a greater awareness of how other people are being impacted by the pandemic, and that actually many people are being affected, not just your own area. Or it may be the opposite. It may be that because things feel better for you in a more cohesive area, that you experience or sense the deprivation less acutely. It feels less bad, even though it's still there. So these are quite interesting things. What can we say about the social cohesion investment? So back in June, what we'd found was that compared with other areas, those that had invested in social cohesion, the integration areas, the 6 local authorities, reported greater trust in politicians and greater trust in other people, stronger connections with family and friends during lockdown, and greater active social engagement. They also had more positive attitudes towards migrants. Was that sustained? What happened by the time we got to December? Everyone had been through a very tough time, and actually, particularly people who were in the integration areas, they often had a tougher time than many others. Well, let's have a look and see what happened. So this is sense of neighbourliness, which is just one of the indexes. And as you can see, in June, when there was quite a lot of sort of general solidarity, most places felt neighbourly, but the integration areas were up there at the top, along with Wales. Over time, the most important thing I think to note here is the straight line for the integration areas. That sense of neighbourliness was sustained across the whole period. It diminished very little indeed, despite the changing circumstances. Whereas in other areas, we see kind of ups and downs and things, a general downward trend that is rather stronger. So it would seem that there is a definite advantage in investing in social cohesion in a systematic way, and that it does sustain itself in ways that I think matter to people. Okay, what about active social engagement? So when we talk about active social engagement, we're talking about a whole range of different things, and we had a list of about 20 possible things people could engage in, and they were just asked to say in the last month, how many of these have you done? So it's not a perfect measure, because it didn't say how often did you do them, did you do it 20 times this month or once, but there are different things that people did, and it's a sort of rough and ready index of active social engagement. And again, what we can see is a much higher level in the integration areas than in the other samples, and also I think somewhat greater stability in the level as well. But overall, what we're seeing is that these are places where the respondents seem to be much more engaged, interested in working and supporting for others in their local area. So whatever's been going on seems to have been doing good. So by December, respondents in the 6 local authority areas were still twice as likely to volunteer compared with those elsewhere. They had a higher sense of neighbourliness. They had a higher level of trust in the local government's response. And they sustained and maintained their positive attitudes about migrants to the UK, so they haven't become any less positive. So I'd like now just to turn to why people volunteer, who they are, and what that means for them and how it affects their lives. So across the UK, we compared volunteers living in any area with other people who were not volunteering. And we're just going to talk about 2 time points at the moment, just to show you something interesting, which is, well, you don't usually show that nothing is interesting, but here I'm going to show you that nothing is interesting. What I want you to note here is that at least half of the respondents in December are different people from those who took part in June. Some of them are the same, but many are new people, different people. So it's not just the same people talking twice. So here's the pattern back in June. And what you can see, the pink bars are volunteers, purple bars are non-volunteers. Basically, across this whole raft of measures, the volunteers are coming out more positively. Stronger family relationships, better relationships with friends, higher levels of trust, lower feelings of relative deprivation, greater trust in others, more neighbourliness, more optimism, better well-being, and so on. Right, what happens by December after they've been through another 6 months of ghastly misery from the pandemic that we've all been struggling through? Well, in a way, nothing's happened. The volunteers are still feeling more positive, more trusting, more connected, and all the rest than the non-volunteers. This is sustaining them, I would argue, or both ways around. They're sustaining it, and it's sustaining them. So overall then, when compared with others, volunteers report being more optimistic for the future, having greater subjective well-being, and having greater trust in other people. So there's a sort of virtuous cycle that seems to go with volunteering and with communities that can encourage and sustain it. It's good for the volunteers, it's good for the communities. So what do we conclude from all of this, just to wrap up? Well, we think that social cohesion is going to play a vital role in the challenges ahead. There's plenty more difficulties that we will all face. Employment prospects, change in working patterns, dealing with health issues, dealing with inequalities and deprivation all over the place, struggling to rebuild community relations where they've become fragmented, and so on. What do we think are the key questions? First of all, can we actually continue to learn from what has been done in these 6 local authority areas and in others where trust and cohesion have proved so resilient? Can we identify and test ways that commitment to cohesion can be sustained across the UK? Are there things that can be expanded and developed elsewhere as well? What are the mechanisms we have to support greater active social engagement and volunteering, and to enhance the benefits of that volunteering for local social cohesion, to actually make a more direct and strong connection between the two things? We're setting out a lot of our ideas about policy in our forthcoming policy paper, which is developed with our research partners. And here we have recommendations and best practice examples for a whole range of things, but in particular a place-based approach that invests in leadership, capacity building, social mixing, cross-sector partnerships, and knowledge exchange. And I'll finish there. Thank you.
Dom, thank you so much for that. I think at one point in your presentation, you said you were going to highlight something that wasn't interesting. That was, well, absolutely fascinating and incredibly important to the work that we are doing. Thank you again to those who have shared with us where you were all from. If you haven't, please do it on the chat function. We'd love to know where you are tuning in from, what organisation you're a part of, and a special thanks to those that have joined us, especially our partners. I know we have Mark and Alex in particular from the Nuffield Foundation. Delighted that you are here and that you have supported our work. Our next 4 speakers will have 5 minutes each to respond to what they've heard from Dom, from the report's findings and its utility to them and their work. First up, we have Rebecca Ramsay, who is Social Integration Programme Manager for Blackburn with Darwen Council and manager of the Our Community, Our Future project. Now, Blackburn with Darwen is a research partner for Beyond Us and Them and one of the 5 integration areas that received funding from the government to develop a social integration programme. Rebecca, thank you so much for joining us and looking forward to hearing from you.
Hi, thank you. So I want to talk about 2 particular bits of the Belong report that struck a chord with me and why I think our integration area work has really had an impact. And those 2 things are volunteering and trust. In a lot of ways, I don't think we're different from many other areas across the country. There have been some astonishing stories of care, compassion and resilience in the last 12 months. We've all seen those. This is just a flavour of our pandemic story as an MHCLG integration area. If you don't know Blackburn with Darwen, we're a district in East Lancashire, about 150,000 in population. About 30% of our population are South Asian and about half of those are Indian and half Pakistani. So pretty much the other 70% are white, but we have a small and growing number of more ethnically diverse residents. We have a really young population and a relatively high achieving set of schools, but health outcomes were already poor for our residents pre-pandemic. People die earlier than average and live longer with ill health. We've been hit harder than most by the pandemic in Blackburn with Darwen. There was one point when you couldn't turn on the news without seeing a panoramic sweep of our beautiful countryside cut into a reporter in a typical terrace street. We've had additional local restrictions, hyper-local restrictions, shielding extensions, you name it, we've had it. And a South Asian community have been disproportionately affected by COVID-19. And I don't think I need to lay out here what the impact of that has been in terms of cohesion and integration, but let's just say there's been highs and lows. All of this makes it even more remarkable that we can evidence through Belong's report that we're faring pretty well. One of the reasons we do seem to be faring better is because so many more people are volunteering, and I guess that's helping them to feel useful or productive, it's keeping them busy, and it's also helping them to feel positive about the future. I haven't got time to talk about all the fantastic work that's happened in Blackburn with Darwen long before we were an integration area, but I can quickly tell you about some of the things we've done as an integration area, which I think might have contributed in some way. Much of the work we delivered through the Our Community, Our Future programme, that's the name we've given to our strategy locally, was actually commissioned, delivered by our friends in the voluntary sector, from 6-figure commissions to 3-figure small grants. As a team, we have a really good relationship with voluntary and faith sector groups of all sizes. They've worked with us to help us understand our social cohesion challenges. They've helped us shape our vision for the borough in terms of social cohesion, and now they're at the forefront of making much of that work happen. The ambassador programmes we've commissioned trained local people, adults, young people and employers who are passionate about their community to better understand the borough as a whole, to be honest about what it is that divides us, and to think about how we build on the reality that we have more in common, to get stuck in, develop and deliver new community activity and social action projects. Our relationships with the voluntary sector and our new ambassadors meant that when COVID hit us, we were able to hit back together, with the voluntary sector working quickly to do what was needed. I can't mention trust and not mention our team of engagement and integration officers, a really skilled team with far-reaching networks and trusted relationships with grassroots groups and individuals. They work closely with other fantastic teams like our community connectors and our social prescribing link workers. We were clear from the outset that we wanted our COVID help hub to be strengths-based, but we knew there would be people we would have to do for in terms of food, shopping, medication, and our engagement and integration officers had a voluntary sector offer mapped wrapping around our help hub in days, and it grew and grew. Our EIOs supported us with local contact tracing and with community testing. They were absolutely the right people to do this because they know and are rooted in our community. At the moment, they're engaging with the vaccine hesitant using that same strengths-based supportive approach. So what next? I want to quote from the summary of the report, which says, "It is the social and personal costs that loom largest. Education, work, relationships and economic survival. These are all areas in which cohesion can play a role." With this in mind, our integration area work and our new community champion work, also funded by MHCLG, are key in our COVID recovery plan. More ambassador programmes, more talking and understanding who we are in Blackburn with Darwen and what we all have to contribute. More community activity with cohesion and integration at its heart. More small grants, more very grassroots community activity, engaging people in and attaching them to their community. More from our EIOs, supporting community development from within the heart of our community, being a visible, positive, proactive presence of the local authority. And new COVID community champions who facilitate two-way engagement at a hyper-local level. These things will further foster that culture of volunteering and continue to build trust. So we'll make sure cohesion plays a really active role in our COVID recovery in Blackburn with Darwen. Thank you.
Rebecca, thank you so much. Incredibly rich 5 minutes there. Appreciate you sticking to time. For those who have questions that are emerging in your minds, please feel free to put them into the Q&A function. We will put them to our speakers shortly. Up next, we have Sail Suleman, who is Cohesion and Equality Officer at Calderdale Council, where he focuses particularly on hate crime reduction. We are proud that Calderdale is another research partner for us at Beyond Us and Them, and whilst not one of the integration areas that received funding, Calderdale consistently focused on kindness and resilience as key elements of its strategy, both of which, as we all know, are central to building social cohesion. Sail, thank you for joining us. Over to you.
Thank you, Nizam. Good afternoon, colleagues. I'd like to build on and add to the contribution made by Rebecca and the presentation delivered by Professor Abrams. Before I start, I'd like to provide some background to Calderdale. Our vision for Calderdale is for a place where you can realise your potential. Whoever you are, whether your voice has been heard or unheard in the past, Calderdale is a place defined by our innate kindness and resilience, by how our people care for each other, are able to recover from the setbacks and are full of hope. For some colleagues, you might be aware that Calderdale experienced some major challenges, including the Boxing Day flooding of 2015, that had a serious impact on the borough. The communities came together and supported the authority in bringing back some normality. COVID-19 has significantly impacted and continues to impact on individuals in the borough. COVID-19 has taken away our given rights. This includes who we can meet, how we interact with others, lessen our opportunities to do what was the norm. To reflect on the report's findings, we've created new partnerships with both key partners, including the statutory, voluntary and faith sector. We have seen social cohesion improving and opportunities for members from all backgrounds have socially interacted with one common goal, thus creating a sense of belonging, breaking down barriers and positively contributing towards social cohesion. I also believe that volunteering has created an opportunity for the volunteers to engage and enhance both their own well-being. Many new friendships have been created through this work. The psychological impact on our mental health and well-being has increased. For some, anxiety has also increased, impacting on confidence. I feel through our engagement, the support through volunteers is making a great difference. At a local level, we have maintained contact with partners, worked together to understand the needs of our residents, provided timely information and supported our communities. Our local COVID-19 partnership group has been instrumental in reaching to local intelligence regarding conspiracy theories. Rebecca touched upon this as well. And it's important that we have timely information sent out to counteract any misinformation. In my opinion, leadership is important. In Calderdale, this has enabled effective delivery of localised services supported by elected members, senior council officers, and delivered in partnership between the voluntary and faith sector. We have local community COVID champions engaging with our communities. As the report reflects, active engagement, including volunteering, has been consistent, creating greater trust and engagement, and that is what we've seen in Calderdale. If I can share with you a quick example of our kindness and resilience in Calderdale, a referral came through at 5 p.m. in the evening from residents who didn't actually have any food. I made contact with one of our local volunteers, and at 8:45 in the evening, the local volunteer delivered a food parcel that was 8 miles outside their local area. And that talks about the resilience and the support of our volunteers being there at the time of need. In conclusion, I believe social cohesion is built on a shared value or goal. It brings together communities, enabling them to work side by side, supporting our communities and ensuring that we can meet the needs when they are required. Thank you.
Sail, thank you so much. Incredible response, and I think Calderdale has really taken leadership despite not being one of the integration areas, and we look forward to seeing more of the work that you have been doing. And also please keep your comments coming. Something Bill said, which I just want to report back to everybody, which is he looks forward to taking and applying the learning in Kent and Medway, and I think that's how we all feel. Everything that we're learning is so grounded in practical activity that I think is fantastic. Up next, we have Councillor Rabnawaz Akbar, who's an executive member for neighbourhoods at the Manchester City Council and Labour member for the Russian Ward. Manchester City Council is a founding member of the Belong Network, which we're thrilled to have you as a member, and we're delighted that they will be joining the next stage of the research project. Also, Councillor Akbar, over to you.
Thank you, Nizam, and good afternoon, everybody. As you said, Manchester is one of the founding members of Belong, and a city with such a great history for campaigning for equality, welcoming people from all across the world, for its innovation and reputation with championing social change and inclusion. It's a sense of pride for us that Belong is actually based in Manchester. We are not an integration area, but I've always actually prioritized politically and at officer level integration and cohesion, have strong relationships with our VC/SE sector, and we're not shy of having difficult conversation when the need arises. In terms of the report, I think it's an excellent report. Actually, what it has done is captured both qualitatively and quantitatively information at key points throughout the pandemic, and it's helpfully identified at local area level the experiences of people and how community relations and issues affecting cohesion have actually improved or been hindered at a time of crisis. Three important findings. I think the first one is volunteering. It stands out for us in Manchester. Manchester wouldn't be half the city if it wasn't for the volunteering. And we've always said that. Absolutely agree with everything that's said in the report in terms of the narrative around what the impact on volunteering, not on the individual, but around the community where those individuals live. As you know, more people access parks and green spaces, so we've had a lot more volunteers actually come forward in terms of forms of litter picking and keeping their area tidy. That's apart from the work they've done to support the most vulnerable and needy in our communities, those who are shielding and those who are suffering from food poverty. Obviously, the local authority had a community hub, but there were individuals and families who were maybe missing out and not getting enough, and local people just basically stepped up to fill that gap. Trust, absolutely agree again. I think national trust kind of faded in somewhat because of events nationally, and also I think maybe test and trace, I think government will agree, maybe did not go as well, but certainly that trust when we've seen during the vaccination period, that has gone back up again locally because they're seeing local GPs, local pharmacies, volunteers again, helping at vaccination centres, people in the community recognizing who's coming there, public health people, local authority officers, that trust is there. And also I think in terms of our local MP and me as an elected member and my other colleagues, what we've done is we've gone onto the online space where some of that misinformation and myth has had a fertile ground. We've not been shy to challenge that head on, and that certainly has helped. In terms of the theme of the report, the investment in social cohesion, in Manchester, I think we don't quantify it. There's no fund which we kind of tap into and say this is for social cohesion. It is part of our Manchester strategy. It runs throughout everything we do. in terms of engagement, like I said, not only elected members, but our officers, and our cultural events, which actually celebrate diversity. Manchester has been a growing city over the last 2 decades. More and more people are coming in to live our city, and there's so many different kind of languages spoken, 200 different languages, and we celebrate all our differences and diversity. And I think, so going forward, I think, as I said, Manchester is a founder of Belong, and we're absolutely delighted that we're going to be part of the Greater Manchester local authorities that are going to go into further research on beyond them and us. And we look forward to kind of taking part in that research. And then when the findings come out, see how that kind of reflects Manchester and beyond. The findings of this report and that research will be part of our COVID recovery plan. Clearly, as people have said, that there is going to be impacts in terms of economic impact, a social impact, a health impact of post-COVID. And really what for us is, is important is that cohesion, you can't sit on your laurels. You can't be complacent. The fact that existing health inequalities, economic inequalities have really been played a part in some of the responses from those people in terms of how they felt, how the pandemic has impacted them, and how it will continue to impact them. So Manchester is in the process of actually developing its own community cohesion strategy. I'm at the chairing a task group, and what we'll do is we'll take on board what this report says, like I said, the further report, and pivotal to that will be noting the key findings around the impact of investing in social cohesion. Although, like I said, it doesn't necessarily have to be financial. These findings will play a key part in terms of for us to consider and shape our thinking and our local consultation as we go forward in what maybe 2 or 3 difficult years. And I've not even mentioned the impact of Brexit, which clearly there is going to be as we move forward. So thank you. I'll leave it at that and happy to answer any questions.
Councillor Akbar, thank you very much. There's an important message that you've just shared there, which is we cannot rest on our laurels. And thank you again for Manchester City Council being a founding member of Belong. If there are organisations that are interested in Belong, please do check out our website and the work that we're doing. We absolutely will have to invest more in this space. So we will be putting questions to our speakers. If you do have questions, please do put them into the Q&A function, not the chat function, so that we can put them to our speakers. Our 4th speaker in response to the findings is Tom Lovesey, Head of Integration at the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government. Tom leads on the Integration Areas Programme, the Community Champion Scheme, ESOL for Integration Fund and Innovation Fund. Tom, thank you for joining us. Looking forward to hearing from you. I hope you're joining our screen. There we go.
Yes,
for a second I was a little bit worried. Over to you, Tom.
So was I. Thank you very much, Nizam, and thanks for that fantastic presentation, Dominic. Just quickly, apologies if you can hear any banging. My neighbours have decided today's the day to take out their fireplace, so if you hear any banging, that's what's happening on my left currently. Delighted to be with you today, supporting communities by working in collaboration with local authorities and local partners is important for all our work, and will continue to be so more now than ever, and certainly going into the future, as the other speakers have said. For COVID, obviously Brexit as a backdrop as well. So I'm really pleased that this report, the earlier report I saw last year, this report, and again the next instalment, really kind of backs up, I think, the work we're all doing and is vital to us internally alone, just across Whitehall for those conversations. By way of background, my team leads, as Nizam said, on the Integration Area Programme. So it's great to see Rebecca on the panel here today. The journey for us in MHCLG started back in 2018 when we launched the Green Paper, inviting views on the government's vision for building strong integrated communities. Alongside that Green Paper, we launched the Integration Area Programme, where the ambition was focusing local and national resource on a common goal to deliver integrated communities to better understand and tackle those challenges specific to a place. So we're working with Blackburn and Darwen, Bradford, Peterborough, Walsall, and Malvern Forest, all, as you all know, are mentioned in the report. And for us, it was a complete shift in how we worked with a place. So it wasn't government going into a place and saying, we understand, we recognise the challenges, we will give you the solutions. It was about working in collaboration with places and understanding that local authorities, local partners will have the answers and the knowledge of a local place. So they are probably better placed to find those solutions. Using it, national government, using us for our levers, etc., to kind of support that work, but it was about working in collaboration, and certainly not a one-size-fits-all. A key theme that runs through the integration area programme and the other programmes, so the English language programme we run and the Community Champion scheme, which was launched on the 20th of January this year, is hyperlocal identification. So that's clearly highlighted strongly in this report, ensuring a person feels belonging and anchoring to where they live. So it's great to see that the 5 areas participating were it kind of demonstrated for the first time to us, and certainly to me as someone who started out on this journey back in 2018, the difference our work, and more importantly the work people like Rebecca and the other 4 areas have done locally. So that's really wonderful to see. I also know that colleagues in my team listening now felt that the term sense of neighbourliness encapsulated the coming together of communities and building of trust, which is at the core of our work. So we were particularly pleased by, I know the tables are amazing in the report and very easy to kind of understand, certainly for someone like me. So the figure 7 report is great because it kind of charts the journey sort of selfishly for those 5 areas that we're working with, and it's fascinating to understand that. And again, it helps us to explain internally as across Whitehall with other departments the work that we do, and I guess the approach we take, which is I think very different, and Rebecca might touch on this in the Q&A, just feels very different in how we work with a place. To the report, yeah, as you can probably tell, really pleased with the findings, I think which captures for the first time in a clear and understandable way the difference and positive impact that can be made where foundations are laid by building relationships. And I think that's key to all of this, between national, local government, local communities, with people sitting at the heart. In terms of the most important element of the findings of the report, I guess the short answer is, and everyone else was probably a lot clearer than I'm going to be, but for me, they're all important, because it will all inform, I think, how we work going forward. So we've seen over the past year, the pandemic has kind of washed over all of us. People have more than before an understanding and opinion, and I kind of reference my parents in that, a strong opinion of what local national government can do, and possibly should do more of, and have an improved connection to their street, town, city, that for some wasn't there before. And I feel this myself, and I think we've all got our own personal story to tell through COVID. COVID has impacted all of us, and we only have to look at our own experiences, as I've said, against this report to understand the importance of connection to place and the vital role local government plays in this. What was interesting to see for me is the level of trust in government, which probably won't surprise many of you listening, but it was interesting that across the pandemic, areas participating, the figure for kind of the level of trust was that bit higher. So I think it's 10.4% as mentioned, which again is really interesting to us, because it's a reflection hopefully of that relationship between us and those local authorities, and also the work, and more importantly the work those local authorities have done with their communities. So they've reached, I don't know, probably a broader group of communities. They have that trust in there, built up over time, which is clearly coming through and working. This clearly demonstrates the work done in these areas, as I say, over time, making connections with communities, building trust, listening, and importantly, acting on what residents say is working. And I think that's really key as well. We can all ask the questions, it's about listening, isn't it? And understanding what that means, and therefore demonstrating or kind of showing, well, we've heard what you've had to say. How does that impact how we change? And if we don't change, why not? And it's about answering those points made. Also want to stress, this can't happen overnight, and it's a challenge I think we felt in the team in MHCLG when we started the programme, that some were looking for very early results. The integration areas, so Rebecca and the other 4, for example, we've now been working with, this is our 3rd year. It takes a long time to build that change, build that trust, but it's about making those connections and sustaining them over time. I was really interested again in the social cohesion, remained more cohesive than ever, with where investment has been made. Some of the standout data for me, again, greater connection with family and friends, 10.5%, greater trust in other people, certainly with respect to COVID-19 restrictions. And we've all, again, I won't touch on that, we all probably got personal experiences as well as kind of work experiences of that. And then well-being being 5.3% higher. We know the importance of well-being. Speaking personally, I know working from home for the past year with children on Google Classroom, neighbours taking out fireplaces, being able to connect to friends, neighbours and others has proven to be and still is so important. I think it also highlights the rise of digital. In many of the interventions we've seen, a lot of the activity in areas has kind of pivoted over. And I know, I'm not sure if Rebecca touched on it, but I know in Blackburn and Darwen, for example, they've got the Help Hub, which they kind of designed at pace back in March to kind of deliver that initial support to residents, whether it be shielding, wellbeing activities. And it's something I think they will probably look to keep and maintain going forward, which is fantastic to see. I think we've seen as a nation going through this together that the connection to places meant people do look to their neighbours for support, whether for, I know, food shopping or simply a sort of hello in the morning. Our shared experiences over the past year, I think, have exposed so much, including those in our communities who need our support. But we were not aware of the need, or the kind of the urgency, I guess, of the need until everything changed for most of us, if not all of us, last March. The evidence in the report on this shows that despite the limits placed on social interaction, people are becoming increasingly aware of the challenges, and hardships faced by others, and evoking deep empathy. Again, this is something for us in the team is really important, and we want to kind of hold on to that and use that to kind of shape where we go next with our work. So finally, and I'm speaking at pace, so apologies, I'm trying to get in within the 5 minutes. To the future, this report builds our evidence that this approach, place-based, working in collaboration with local authorities, being led by local knowledge of the opportunities and challenges, is working. And that's clearly demonstrated by this report. The pandemic has highlighted what works and what could be better in a clear and direct way. The speed to which these local authorities were able to tap into their networks and build the trust needed for shielding, well-being activities, vaccine take-up, the promotion of, and a million other things is supported by the foundations each LA built with residents over time. I want to see the energy, goodwill and volunteering that we have seen over the past year harnessed as we move forward. The positive behavioural shifts captured in this report are good to see, and I want to ensure this learning is shared widely. It highlights much that will inform our thinking as we move forward as a team, and I look forward to the next instalment. Thank you very much.
Very impressive, Tom. You managed to get it all in there, I think.
Thank
you very much. So now is an opportunity for us to invite back our speakers, and for me to say thank you so far to Dom, of course, who presented everything to us, to Rebecca, to Sail, to Rabnawaz, to Tom. So if I could invite you all to come back onto our screen so I can put some questions to you, and thank you to our participants on the webinar today who put those questions to us. So I think we're just waiting on Tom, and hopefully Councillor Akbar will be joining us momentarily. So my first question is from Mike Fraser. Mike, thank you so much for this. This is both for Dom and to Tom. Results of surveys demonstrate unequivocally that investment in social cohesion works and promotes civic good in investment areas like Bradford, etc. So how likely is funding to continue beyond March 2022? Maybe less for Dom, but Dom, I think maybe I'll come to you first to put your thoughts forward, and then we go to Tom for the political answer.
Okay, well, I think hopefully with reports like this one and evidence like this, it will be possible to build in. It may not be that there's more total money available to local authorities and councils, but that they can see the longer term value in investing in cohesion with what they have. And it's a really tough call how you balance those priorities, of course. But, you know, I think we have to look ahead beyond the immediate crisis and say, what are we going to need? If this recurs, or if new crises come along, how are we going to make sure we're in a position to survive them and carry on through them? And I think this sort of investment is absolutely essential for that purpose. So I hope there'll be more money here, but even if there's not, I hope that some money can move from elsewhere towards this sort of priority.
Thank you. And Tom, before I come to you, I think there are a few more questions here which are highly relevant. David Barkley. David, thank you. Given the very impressive results of the government's integration strategy, as demonstrated by this research, when can we expect it to be scaled up beyond the 5 areas?
All very good questions. I think just starting with this report, I think, again, as Dom said, the evidence it provides to me and the team internally is invaluable. I think I've said to Jo when I've spoken to her previously, it's really helpful just because it tells the story of the work we're doing. And it's probably the first time, certainly on the integration work, that we've had something which demonstrates very clearly the impact made by working differently, I think, between sort of national and local government. In terms of the future, we have, the integration areas, those 5 existing, work is still underway. Clearly, due to COVID, lots of things were paused. We have English language ongoing. The Community Champions Fund is clearly ongoing, only starting at the back end of January. We're looking at what the future brings. I guess what I can say is I'm hopeful, and I want to see this go forward, because I think what we've seen over the last year actually is people's understanding of the importance of this work has been brought to the fore. This time last year, I would probably go to meetings and an external, internal, and would talk a lot about this work. People understood it, but didn't really understand it, if you know what I mean. They kind of got, that's very good and that's nice, and they're nice to have things. What's been really demonstrated and brought out in this report over the last year is those links to people in communities, those individuals, and not talking high level, it's about a person in a place. That's really valuable, and that has made a huge difference, which is why I've sort of touched on the community champions work. That's there to kind of promote the take up of the vaccine, but that isn't DHSC led. That's us working with local authorities and communities. It's about them identifying those local people who can make that difference and other people will listen to. So I guess all I would say is watch this space. I'm hopeful for what the next stage is, but I'm happy to stay in touch with people.
Thank you, and I hope the findings speak for themselves in terms of the positive value of the impact, of course. Rebecca, I think this one we'll give to you. Samir asks the question for integration areas. What are the key changes you have been able to achieve so far in terms of cohesion that would not have been possible without the additional resources and supports?
I think predominantly that's the volume of work that we've been able to do with that significant investment. So we've worked directly with over 3,000 people and 200 community groups, and that's been very explicitly about social integration. So it's about talking to them about what they're doing and how they can apply a social integration lens to that, rather than just community development work, which obviously is of great value, but in a different way. The amount that we've done and the way we've had the freedom and the flexibility to be able to do it. So it's been about trying new things. It's been about doing different things. It's been about things not necessarily having to be successful first time every time, and having that supportive team within the local authority around that to make sure that we're on the right track and we're in the right direction and that we're sharing the learning from it. Two of the greatest assets, I think, of our integration area team have been having somebody who's dedicated to doing communications work. So all of those stories that we hear that normally we would sit in the office and go, that's great, that's worked really well. It's in the local newspaper, it's on the council's social media feeds, it's there for everybody to see. And I think that's been a real asset of the programme. And one of the other things that has been fantastic is having somebody focused on evaluation. So we've been able to make sure that everything that we've done, we've really looked at whether it's worked, whether it hasn't worked. And we've also been able to do some small pieces of research ourselves, which have perhaps backed up things that we already knew, but gives us that evidence to be able to take what we want to do to the next level as well.
Rebecca, thank you so much. And if I could bring Sail and Councillor Akbar in, our colleagues at Youth Action have asked the question, how, and I know Rebecca partly answered this in her remarks back, how has your organisation adapted your cohesion work programme as a result of COVID-19? And please, could you give some tangible examples, please? Thank you. If I could come to you, Sail, first, if that's okay.
You can do, yes. I think we've got some good examples that we can share. I mean, bringing young people together. For example, one of the initiatives that was done by the Magna Mosque in Halifax is the Halifax Community Fridge, and that's been set up by the young people of the mosque who is quite interested in supporting the local needs in the area. And they went about setting up a community fridge that would be open to anybody who had that need to come in to pick up some food, etc. And I'm glad to report that it's the young people from the mosque itself who actually placed the fridge, the community fridge, on the mosque grounds in a predominantly high South Asian heritage Muslim community area. And the usage is 95% and above is from people from the indigenous community. And that connecting between the young people being inspired by doing that work And the example that I shared earlier on with the young person who actually, the referral that came through at 5 p.m. in the evening, I contacted the community fridge for some support, thinking it'd probably be the next morning. And they were quite inspired, confident, and they went out that evening, approximately 6 miles away from the area, to deliver a food parcel. And people have been working across kind of boundaries. So sometimes you might find people might not be comfortable or confident coming into areas that might be of a predominantly characteristic or race, etc. But I think through the pandemic, we've definitely seen this cohesion increase in time and time again. We've got barriers being broken down day by day. And I think it's inspired people that we now have a common good. And I think Councillor Rabnawaz talked about the kind of segregation at the beginning of COVID-19, when the media was hyping on about the BAME community being COVID-19 infectious transmissions, etc. But as time's gone on, the local reflection and the media working with local groups and local initiatives has driven forward that ambition to bring about that social cohesion in Calderdale.
So thank you. Councillor Akbar, can I invite you to also put your remarks to the question?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what I would like to say is that cohesion, I think, ongoing work, and what's helped us in Manchester is that those relationships, those engagements for decades. And whenever you hit a time of crisis, certainly had a crisis in 2017 after the arena attack, but those relationships were there for people who knew each other, who trusted each other. They got together and they did what was the right thing. And I think in a way, the similar things happen now. Yes, I said new groups of local people have got together and gone to kind of their local place of worship or a group to litter picking. But the network was there. They knew where to go, how to get together, and there were the facilitators. Obviously, the local authority, our neighbourhood teams were facilitating that. Give you an example. We've got a building, British Muslim Heritage Centre, which is a fantastic historic building in the centre of Manchester. And they took on, they had accommodation. So when we had to take homeless people off our streets and find them accommodation, they offered. They were one of the first ones and said, we'll take them in. And yet before COVID, that wasn't a thought that actually occurred to anybody. So likewise, I think there's a local mosque and place of worship, but obviously closed for a lot of the time and just open for kind of worship. But what they've done is they've opened a food bank. And that food bank is accessible to everybody. You don't have to be for any particular faith or no faith. No questions are asked. The food is provided from local kind of the fair share, which is a local wholesale market, other local supermarkets. And basically it's about, and people who go there actually volunteer, again, are from all communities. They're not necessarily from the Islamic faith who are attending this mosque. So for me, I think it's about having those foundations of relationships that actually helps you at a time of crisis. And I think that's been mentioned by other people as well. It's very difficult to start from scratch. You know, it's not easy. So it's important that, like I said, and go back to, we can't be complacent. We don't know when the next crisis will hit us. And it's always, and sadly, the most vulnerable, the most needy, those who are already suffering from existing inequalities that suffer the most.
Councillor Akbar, thank you. The next question we have is from Tim Robertson. Tim, thank you so much for joining us. CEO of the Anne Frank Trust, where they educate and empower 10 to 15-year-olds to speak out against prejudice. And Tim's question is, what role have young people played in the social cohesion in the investment areas? Now, where that doesn't apply to you directly, I'd love to get a sense from our panelists, the importance of young people in the context of cohesion. So perhaps I can do it the other way around and go back to Professor Abrams, Dom, to get a sense from you. And I'm conscious of time, so we have about less than 10 minutes to try and get through the next round of questions. So if you can be as succinct as possible. Thank you.
Okay. Well, we haven't collected data directly on this, but I do have other evidence and knowledge. I mean, I think where they've had an opportunity, young people have been ready and willing and you know, very keen to help and do things. And often, of course, they've not had much else to do, so it's been something that's been very good for them. But actually, I would say across the nation, they've been underutilized in that respect. They've been a huge resource, and actually a body of people that we need to involve at an early age in as much as possible in everything to do with communities, and gaining that empathy and understanding of what life is like for many other people. So I think we partly missed an opportunity here. I know a lot of the partner organisations here with Belong are involved with supporting youth to do all kinds of things, but I still think there's a huge space there that we really should be moving into and developing even more fully. So I hope there's going to be more ahead on that.
Thank you. And maybe I can go to Rebecca next.
Yeah, so one of the strands of our integration area work is about young people and social mixing between children and young people. Again, some of you will know Blackburn with Darwen, but we have some quite residentially segregated areas in Blackburn with Darwen, and some schools that are quite racially segregated as well. So it was very important to us that young people were a key part of our strategy. So one of the things that we've done is a youth ambassador programme that's worked with young people over a period of time to talk to them about some of the things I mentioned when I spoke, to talk to them about who we are in Blackburn with Darwen, what our differences are, what brings us together, and to share some of those experiences and to undertake some social action together. So that's been one of the strands of the programme. But the other one, of course, has been funding the linking network to do that work in schools, within schools and between schools. So just two things that we've done there.
Thank you. And if I can perhaps go to Sail next to hear about Calderdale.
Yes, you can. I mean, some of the work, I mean, obviously with the pandemic and the lockdown coming in, lockdown coming back out again, it's been quite difficult to engage with young people. It's been quite challenging. But what we have been doing is we've been engaging with young people on the streets through youth activity, again, because the premises are shut as well. There's less engagement taking place. So it's been outreach work, working with people through the contacts that we have and trying to keep them inspired by what's taking place. Because I think the challenges are that we're trying to get people to abide by the guidance, and the guidance sometimes is quite grey. It's never clear from, you know, a central government perspective coming down to local governance and managing that. So we've had our local contact, for example, the HIMAP project, which works with young people. They've been going out doing the engagement, talking to young people. From some of the places of worship, young people have got involved with pulling together the food parcels, some of the soup kitchens that have been operating. So we are trying to inspire young people to get involved with volunteering and supporting our local networks, because they would be the future, hopefully, to see what happens at the local level and pick up where sometimes we can't get to them areas.
Thank you. Councillor Akbar.
I think everybody would probably agree. I think young people have been probably one of the cohorts that's most impacted by this pandemic. And it does not matter, you know, whether you're primary school, secondary school, or college, or even at university, or even working and young. I think a lot of work that we did in Manchester was around making sure the challenges young people were facing, and basically, you know, if you've got nothing to do, you know, basically get out of the house and get involved in the wrong activities. But I agree with Dominic. I think there's a lot we can do in terms of getting young people. Although there were young people obviously getting involved in volunteering and doing the things we want them to do, I think there's a space there where we can do more work to get them more involved, and clearly that is something that we.
Thank you so much. Tom, anything to add on young people and the need for investment in cohesion?
Yeah, only to say I agree with what everyone else has said, and it's something as Rebecca touched on, we were clear at the outset of the integration work actually about within the 5 areas that was kind of a key strand of work. So it's something which is still important to us. I think actually if this time last year COVID hadn't have arrived and we pushed on, it would have been something we were looking to kind of develop more going forward, and it's something which is still really important to us.
Fantastic. I'm very conscious of time. I'm so grateful to everybody who sent in their comments and their questions. I will go around and offer everybody an opportunity to share anything that they may have not had the chance to speak on. Dom, there's a couple of questions which I think are quite data focused, so I may put them to you. So we have a question from Jabir. How was data collected in the 6 investment areas, and has it been collected in the same way for the national data, is one. And then Lucy has asked a question on, did your research touch on the challenges related to unemployment, underemployment, insecure work, and how this can have an impact on people's views on migration and the experience of integration locally? This is especially important given the additional pressures of COVID on employment. Sorry, I'll come to you for those two questions, and anything else you want to add?
Thank you very much, Nizam. Well, the data collection question is quite a complicated one, but I'll keep it as simple as I can. So the survey work was conducted all online, and we largely used a survey provider to collect a lot of the data, and we also went through our local authority partners and our community partners to access people that they had access to as well. Once we had access to those participants, we sustained those participants and contacts and added new ones as the project went along. So we built up our sample. In the way we analysed the data, though, we were very conscious that we needed to adjust for and control for small differences between the subsamples in terms of things like the demographic makeup, socioeconomic status, and all those kinds of things. So all of the findings I've presented have already made adjustments for all those things and take those into account. So I think that's probably important to say. The other aspect of the data involving focus group and interviews, we were put in touch with those people largely with the help of our partners, but we conducted the interviews completely independently. And we keep hold of all the data and don't share it directly with any of the partners. So we go to great lengths to protect anonymity, confidentiality, and all the rest. I will say we've had fantastic feedback in both the focus groups and interviews and the surveys that people think they've been incredibly interesting and valuable to take part in. So that's been very good. And the data are clear and consistent and make good sense to us. So I think we're statistically in a strong place with it. In terms of things like impacts of unemployment, and there are many other issues like effects on different types of ethnic minorities, on different age groups and all the rest. As we move into this next phase of the project, we will have sufficient numbers in the total sample sizes to begin to dive into and penetrate those questions, and we will be doing that. But at present, we have held back from that on the basis that the data are there, but we'd rather have more before we say anything too strong about it.
Thank you. So a last opportunity for colleagues to share anything that they have not had an opportunity to, and if you can't think of anything, what's given you hope from this report? Sail, I'm coming to you first.
I think for me, the hope is that we've been here before. I talked about the flooding in 2015. We're in a pandemic. We've had 12 months of it. And I think the volunteers, the community spirit and the communities working with us have really done a great job by supporting the authority in getting through a very difficult time.
So thank you. Councillor Akbar.
Thank you. I mean, I think everybody probably accept this has been probably the biggest social, economic, health challenge any of us have faced in our lifetimes. And those who are older, probably since the Second World War. 120,000 plus people, have died from this. I think it's been positive that a lot of the cohesion work we've done, that built that resilience is in, has benefited us through this period. But going forward, I think to kind of, in memory of those who we've lost, I think it's important that we build on this and we, especially the cohesion work, but also I think the pre-existing inequalities in our society, because you never know when the crisis is going to happen. And I think if we address them, then next time we have a crisis, then hopefully we'll be in a much stronger position. And that is for me, it's a learning thing. Yeah? And there's hope that I think, how people our communities have reacted. There is hope that we can go that much further and be better next time around.
Thank you. Rebecca?
Yeah, thank you. I'd just like to say that sort of the pandemic really hit us just as we were at the end of our first year of integration area work, and that timing was terrible because we were so excited about what we'd achieved and we were really looking forward to building on moving that forward, and there was so much of that work that it just wasn't practical to do under those circumstances. There are some things we'd have been able to do virtually, but the vast majority of our work needs that real life face-to-face interaction. So we're really excited about getting back to that now in the coming months and building on and taking things forward. And we're in a really privileged position that we've got this investment that will not only take forward social integration work in Blackburn with Darwen, but will be a really key part of our COVID recovery.
Thank you, Rebecca. Tom, any last words from you?
Yeah, just to say what everyone else has probably said is that I'm decidedly hopeful, I think, because I think this report gives us the evidence to kind of effectively, for me, certainly kind of fight the corner for this work, which is kind of more important than ever. It also means that with this learning and these experiences aren't forgotten, and it's something we touched on, I think, earlier in terms of the evaluation, understanding what works and what doesn't work. And part of the reason we started the program 3 years ago is we didn't have that evidence base. This report is another kind of foundation, if you like, for us to kind of move forward. So with that, I think, yeah, I'm relatively hopeful for what tomorrow will bring.
Thank you. And if I may use the discretion of being the chair to add a few more comments before we close, which is to say, one of the things I have been involved with for the past 6 months is to chair part of London's resilience structures, which is a direct response to COVID and coordinating activity. And what we see in London is during peacetime, I mean, I think the challenge of cohesion work for us all, and everybody who works in this space knows the priorities and the challenges that we have of prioritizing cohesion work. I think what COVID has shown us is the importance of investing during peacetime, if I may use that analogy, in cohesion work so that we are prepared during wartime-like scenarios that we've seen up and down the country during COVID. And so it's not just a nice to have, it's an absolute necessity for when things like this emerge, especially when we've seen it also shine a spotlight on structural inequalities, which sadly fall disproportionately in some communities over others. And so I think the report just shows the absolute critical nature of the work that we are all doing. And of course, I mean, thanks to all of our speakers today for everything that you have brought. I think it's been absolutely incredible. And I just wanted to add a few more things that the Belong Network is also involved in. So as well as this research, the power of sport is another piece of research that Belong has done, using sport to improve cohesion and integration. Radical kindness, which is around examples of kindness across difference over the course of the pandemic. Shared ground training program, supporting neighborhoods where there is conflict and tension, and lots more resources and toolkits. So to find out more about us, belongnetwork.co.uk, I really, really encourage it. Otherwise, thanks to our speakers, thanks to you all for joining us, and I wish you a lovely weekend. Take care. Bye-bye now.